Great, it's 7:02. We'll call the meeting to order here. One final reminder, if you want to speak, please sign in on the list. You can always drop off, but we'll close the sign-in sheet here now as the meeting gets started. Give you a last few minutes to sign up. Tonight is the March 11th, 2019, a regular meeting of the acting president and board of trustees of the Village of Burr Ridge. First order of business is the call to order, well, we did that, and now the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great, and now the sign-in sheet should be closed for residents' comments. If we could please grab the sign-in sheet. But while we're doing that, right before residents' comments, we've got a little bit of good news that I'm going to share with all of you and the town. You know, we've got a lot of great schools here, and Gower is one of them right here in Burr Ridge, and I know there's a lot of students from Gower here tonight. I see some friendly faces, and they've had a very successful season with their Scholastic Bowl. They won all but 2 matches this season, and the games require team members to know a wide variety of topics. These include geography, history, civics, math, and popular culture. And led by the team's coach, Amy Small, the students engage in intense competitive practices where they work on honing their knowledge and thinking of strategies that will help them win these games. They're an amazingly smart and hardworking group, and they should all be proud of their hard work and dedication. We've got some of them here tonight, so I'd like to read off your names. If you're here, please stand and wait till the end. We'll recognize you all at the end together. And I apologize ahead of time if I don't pronounce your name right. Please forgive me ahead of time. But and if someone's on this, if someone's here and is not on the list, please wave and we'll get your name. So first, we've got Roan Shanda, Grace Choi, Adolf Galinsky, Anastasia Galinsky, Abraham Jared, Sami Kal, Lazar Martik, Jesse Park, Adam Pino, and Alex Stisniski. Did I get it right, or even close? Well, you all did a great job. You all got it right. So a big round of applause for the Gower Scholastic Bowl. Thank you. Okay, now on to the portion of the meeting. Roll call, please.
Trustee Francis. Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Model.
Up here.
Trustee Pavesa.
Here.
Trustee Matal. Here. Trustee Snyder. Here. Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
The board makes a motion to approve to participate
Trustee, do I ask him?
Sure.
Trustee Francis,
Here.
could you state the reason that you're not here tonight?
I'm out of town on business.
Thank you.
So we need a motion from hello, Trustee Francis, Scott Euler. We need a motion from the board to approve Trustee Francis's participation by electronic.
So moved.
Second. Clerk, please call the roll. Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal? Yes. Trustee Pavesa?
Here.
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great.
Question? I've been here a long time. It's the first time I remember having to do this. Since when did this kick in?
That's part of the open.
Pardon?
It's part of the open.
Okay.
Participate by telephone.
Thank you.
It's a technicality. Obviously, everybody approves, but it's supposed to be a formal.
Mr. Euler, could you speak into the microphone, please?
Sure, sorry. Was just explaining the motion and the vote.
Great. And Trustee Francis, you've been officially approved here, so we'll get on with the consent agenda. Okay.
May I have the floor, please?
Yes, Trustee Schiappa.
Considering that we had so many challenges in the last meeting regarding Open Meetings Act, I kind of wanted to remind all of us of the rules, the Open Meetings Act, and what are our policies that we have in place here for the Village of Burridge to run our meetings.
That'll come at the end.
Okay,
You can
so,
talk at
no,
the end,
this
trustee
is, gotta
Scott,
come
but
now
I've-
because the residents shall be permitted to speak and address us under the rules established and recorded by the public body, okay? The Village of Burridge has enacted 18 rules on how we govern and conduct our board meetings. Okay, nowhere in these 18 rules is there a sign-up sheet mentioned. Nowhere in these 18 rules is it a requirement that you must sign in in order to speak in public comment, resident or non-resident. So the residents
And nowhere in these rules is it mentioned that you have to speak on an agenda topic. That's not mentioned anywhere in the rules. In addition, rule number 1, the agenda consists of 12 separate items, must be adhered to.
You've not been recognized.
And you
Mr.
cannot-
Francis.
you
Trustee
cannot
Scott,
skip
you're
over
on the
that.
floor. If you're not on the floor, we're trying to have order, want to have a nice meeting here, let's keep it, get recognized by the chair. I'll let him finish his comments here, and then we'd like to move on.
I'd like for Trustee Francis to finish.
I'm not recognizing him. Thank you, your time is concluded. You can speak.
Why
during
are you
the-
not recognizing Trustee
Because
Francis?
I'm the chair of the meeting, I'd like to get on with the consent agenda. You will have many other opportunities to speak during the meeting.
Okay, well, I'll finish his comment.
Thank you.
So,
Great.
The-
So, the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, we're out of order here. It is time for resident comments, so let's look at the sign-in sheet here. Burridge resident Jerry Sweeney, please approach the microphone. You've got 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. No, my topic is not on an agenda item. This is appropriate.
Residents can speak on topics, as was just clarified.
All right, well, by way of introduction, my name is Jerry Sweeney. I'm a resident of Burr Ridge. I have gone to all District 181 and District 86 schools myself personally. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of me graduating from high school. I have 5 children, all of whom have matriculated through 181 and District 86. Cumulatively, I have got 65 years of children's educations in this school system, and myself 13. I have owned 5 homes in the district. As I said, I'm currently a Burr Ridge resident. I'm an attorney. I've had 40 years of litigation experience. And I would consider myself, based on my 65 years of children's educations in this district and my own personal 13 years here in my 5 homes and my approximate 57 years of intermittent residency here in Clarendon Hills, Hinsdale, and Burr Ridge, to be somewhat of an expert on real estate values and on the educational system here. What I'd like to address is what I consider to be sort of political activism by this board with respect to the District 86 tax referendum. I think it creates a conflict of interest. I think that trustee Model, acting president, is in conflict of interest with respect to his participation in supporting the Vote No group and facilitating somewhere in the area of at least $18,000 plus of donations intended to undermine and influence and ultimately defeat the District 86 tax referendum. I think it's inappropriate, and I think it's inappropriate because you were elected as a trustee, and I think the questions that need to be determined by the board, and I have raised all of these with the board, and I have had an exchange with a couple of the board members, and I have received the opinion of council here with which I agree to the limited extent I think that opinion addresses the issue of conflict, but I think that there is a broader circumstance that presents itself here. I think the questions that need to be considered by this village board is whether the outcome of this tax referendum is beneficial to the interests of at least some residents of Burr Ridge. Are there benefits to the acting mayor if the referendum is defeated that put his personal interests in conflict with the interests of those he serves? And is he acting in a way to influence the outcome of this vote? In fact, the mayor's priority is to undermine, manipulate, and finally defeat the outcome of a tax referendum, which many of the village residents considered to be in their best interests. I think therein lies an obvious conflict of interest. I think that it is impossible to separate Mr. Mottle's role as a village trustee and as acting pro temp mayor of the village from that of a private citizen. And what has been said to me by council and through one of the board members in terms of council's opinion is that Mr. Mottle and any trustee is able to act as a private citizen versus acting as a trustee. Well, when you get into a taxing referendum that affects the residents of this village, it is impossible to decide which hat you're going to wear at that time. The fact of the matter is that with respect to property taxes, which Mr. Mottle has proclaimed he is the leading advocate for reducing, they're all commingled. There is an element in property taxes that relates to assessments from the village, from the village park district, as well as the District 181 and District 86. Those are issues that cannot be segregated. One cannot say, I'm acting at this time with the hat of a private citizen and another time with the hat of a public official. So I believe there is an inherent conflict of interest here. The other interesting thing to me is that in receiving the campaign literature for the no vote, which I think is interesting in that there are no individual names associated
Sir,
with it.
we've reached the 5 minute. Please conclude your remarks.
I think the fact of the matter is, in Mr. Mottle's campaign literature, he indicates he does not want to see any tax increase. So it's not a matter of District
Sir,
86
please
doing
conclude
better.
your remarks.
It is a matter of District 86 doing nothing as a result of a defeat that arises out of a clear and apparent conflict.
Thank you for your comments, sir.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Let's maintain order, please. We've got Yvonne Mayer, a Burridge resident, up next for 5 minutes.
Good evening. Tonight I'd like to touch on a few different points. I'd like to begin with some positive news. I'd like to compliment your employee, Evan Walter, for the fantastic job he's been doing protecting Burridge residents. He is currently working with the Environmental Quality Commission, on which I have been appointed, and the amount of research time and dedication he has shown really needs to be commended by everyone in this room. So thank you very much, wherever he's sitting tonight.
Thank you, Evan. Well done, Evan.
Okay, so now, with regard to public comments, I have never, in all the years of going to meetings, whether it's this meeting, board meetings, other town meetings, had to sign up or had other residents have to sign up to make closing comments. The purpose of closing resident or non-resident comments is so that if something comes up during the discussion by the trustees or whoever the presiding board is, people can get up and make a comment about that. So I think you have it wrong, and I would ask for clarification from the village attorney on that. Now, most importantly tonight, I believe Mr. Mottle should not be allowed to preside over this meeting. At the last meeting, he voted to not remove himself as the acting village president, and as a result, the vote was tied. However, he had no authority to cast his vote. Section 2.67 of the Municipal Code for Burridge sets out the rules of order that are to be followed by this governing body. Rule 10 states, quote, Rule 9 states, every member who shall be present when a question is stated by the chair shall vote therein unless excused by the board or unless the member shall be directly or indirectly interested in the question, in which case the member shall not vote. Clearly, the motion was to remove him as the presiding mayor. He cast the tiebreaker, or he cast a vote creating a tie. It was in his self-interest to cast that vote because he did not want to be removed as the presiding mayor. However, under your own municipal code, your own rules of order, he did not have the authority to cast that vote. And in my opinion, the vote is invalid, or at least his vote on the motion, and the attorney for the village and the rest of the trustees should apply Rule 10 and reach the correct outcome. and as a result, Mr. Model should not be allowed to preside tonight, since he is only sitting in that chair because of his violation of Rule 10. Thank you.
Well, again, this is a Burridge Village Board meeting. Let's please keep the order. Next, we've got Richard Morton, Burridge resident. Please, you're recognized to speak for 5 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Richard Morton, Lake Ridge Club. Lived in Lake Ridge Club since 1989. So tonight is March 11th. And from my vantage point, there are some trustees that are still on the undecided or uncommitted side as it relates to Skyrgen. I'm pleased that Skyrgen right now is shut down by virtue of the field order. But I think it can only be viewed as temporary, and we need to remain vigilant. Several meetings ago, Trustee Model, I overheard him remark that he believed the back fence covered installed last summer solid and uncontrolled release of PTO. Well, that's wrong, and specifically about the back fence issue, it's a sham. Illinois EPA is guilty if they allow Skyrgen to design a test protocol that was not designed to provide any useful information. They allowed test equipment that can detect ethylene oxide to only 180 micrograms per cubic meter and no lower. That amount is referred to by thermogenics as 21 ppm. I've lost a few seconds.
I gave you a few extra at the beginning.
And in my opinion, they used the 0.1 ppm to make it seem like a tiny amount. Well, that's not true with ETO. They made the choice intentionally, knowing the test equipment is available that's 2,500 times more sensitive. And if you assume ETO was present at just below the detection limit of 0.1 ppm, the potential lifetime cancer risk from the possible emission was well above 1.5 million in a million. And given the recent EPA test results that were reported last week, this is more fact than conjecture. I carefully analyzed the EPA test results, the independent test results by Burridge and EPA, and you've seen some of these spreadsheets. You can't see much of them, but maybe you can see all of the red numbers that are appearing on the spreadsheets. Well, what those red numbers are showing of the 283 measurable samples that have been collected from 52 different test sites over 35 discrete days. And every one of them is over 0.06 micrograms. And at that level, the lifetime cancer risk is 182 out of a million. So every one of them gives a cancer risk starting at 182 out of a million. It goes up astronomically. The second sheet, I won't bother to show them, but it actually goes and shows the calculated cancer risks, and it exceeds the upper bound of acceptable risk as cited by EPA. The third spreadsheet will show you how many times over the presumed upper boundary these numbers are, and to provide some wiggle room, I used a 3x multiplier, and still they all remained above that list except for just 7 test sites. The fourth sheet shows the averages of all test days by location, and they too show elevated numbers. So I then was interested in the question about how this might affect the trustees. So I went out and found the addresses for all of the trustees and compared the distances from the test sites that were used by Burridge, by Willowbrook, and EPA, and extrapolated it to their homes. So, for example, Mr. Paveza lives about 0.7 miles away, and the next closest test site shows a cancer risk of 1,054. Mr. Snyder, 1,963 in a million. Mr. Model, 960. 997. Guy Francis, 996. So you're all living with a potential risk. Now, we've got a relief while they're shut down, but this is talking to the importance of keeping them shut down, that we're all living with this problem. So there's two actions I'd ask each trustee tonight. Approve the request on the agenda for more air testing, and that each of you take the time to write our state and federal representatives and senators a letter encouraging them to redouble their efforts to improve the regulatory environment and to protect our air and water. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Morton. Okay, and now we've got Mr. Bittner. You're recognized for 5 minutes, please.
I'll hold off till after the meeting.
Okay. Ms. O'Hare, you're recognized for 5 minutes, please.
Hello again. Am I supposed to turn this on or no? Hello again. Good evening, trustees. I have 3 items regarding Mr. Model's conduct that I wanted to go over. They'll be real quick this week. The first is actually ironic that the 5 minutes keeps being mentioned because last board meeting, I was hurried off before my time was up. By the time I was back to my seat, there was still 4 minutes and change. So I would like to ask that in the future, Mr. Model have his stopwatch checked. My second item is, I hear it often mentioned not to bring the referendum issues into this meeting, but I'd like to ask that Mr. Model not bring the referendum issues into my home. It's been my understanding that acting mayors do not follow our resigned Mayor Straub's practice of publicly putting their personal interests of the referendum vote no or the do better, intermingling that with public and private agendas. So I'd like to ask that Mr. Model take my name off his list. I've tried unsuccessfully, so I thought maybe in this forum might have more impact. I've been trying to stop the Zach Model for mayor calls and the Do Better 86 calls. I don't know if they're robocalls, but they're harassing my family during the dinner hour. And my last item is to return to Mr. Model a sign that was placed without authorization on a private property on Deer Path Trail. I'm returning this today. The person was unable to make it, but I would, again, want to just add that to the conduct of Mr. Model that continues to concern me. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, great. Just leave it over there, ma'am. Thank you. It's not appropriate for you. Anyway, all right, we're going to carry on now. The residents' comments have gone. We'll carry on with the consent agenda. Oh, yeah, well, did any residents not sign up that would like to speak at this time? You can sign up right now. Okay, otherwise you'll get another chance right at the end. The consent agenda. Here, please, let's put your name down on the list, and you're welcome to approach. We'll give you 5 minutes here. Make sure she's got that. And then I'll need that because that's my little time sheet. Ms. Galinsky, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Galinsky, and I will be attending Hinsdale South High School next year. I would like to thank Zach Model for shedding a light on the curriculum inequities within District 86. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, great. Now we'll carry on with the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests. in which event the item will be removed from the consent agenda. So we'll follow along on the big screen here. Under minutes, A, receive and file draft stormwater committee meeting of February 21st, 2019. Under B, receive and file draft plan commission meeting of March 4th, 2019. Under C, receive and file draft of environmental quality committee meeting of March 6th, 2019. Under ordinances, 6A.
Remove.
Okay. Under resolutions, 7A, approval of resolution authorizing sales tax rebate agreement between the Village of Blue Ridge and Aramus Materials. Under 8, considerations, we skip on down to E, acknowledgement of withdrawal of variation for location of dumpster in a front yard, B05-2019 St. Mark Coptic Church. Under F,
Remove.
Under G, approve of change to economic development meeting schedule. Under H, approval of recommendation to award contract for village-wide landscaping maintenance to Desiderio Landscaping LLC of Grant Park, Illinois, in the amount of $105,230. Under I, approval of recommendation to award contract for mosquito abatement to Clark Environmental Mosquito Management, Inc. in the amount of $45,400. Under J, approval of vendor list dated March 11, 2019, in the amount of $191,464.05 for all funds, plus $190,542.46 for payroll, for a grand total of $382,006.51, which includes special expenditures of $10,425 for ash tree removal, $34,280.08 for rock salt, and $13,026 for water main replacement engineering services, and $15,990 for the purchase of a speed trailer. So, that is the consent agenda. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
And just to clarify, we've removed ordinance A, and we've removed F under consideration. 6A and 8F have been removed, so your motion and your second still stand? Wonderful. Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal? Yes. Trustee Cabeza?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Great. Okay, so we've gotten through the consent agenda. Next, we're on considerations. 8A, update regarding 6A. I'm sorry, we skipped that one. Approval, under 6A, approval of an ordinance granting conditional sign approval on sign variation as per the Village of Blue Ridge sign ordinance for approval of 4 subdivision entryway signs at a single subdivision entryway at Lakeside Point Subdivision, SO2 2019, 11650 Bridewell Drive, McNaughton Development. Who's taking this one, or?
Evan can present the overview of the Planning Commission's recommendation.
Thank you. Would you mind bringing up the staff report, or at least the relevant map? Should be bookmarks on the side. The bookmark on the left, top left corner. Thank you. You could scroll down a few pages.
Just a quick
Right there.
question or
Yes,
comment.
Attorney Euler's got a quick
Trustee-
comment.
Trustee Scott, did you have a specific concern, or do you want
No,
the staff to go through?
Yeah,
Yeah.
just I'm finding myself in this position now to approve something from McNaughton Development. In the previous meeting, Trustee Model had pointed out that I received.
You're gonna get your chance to talk, Trustee Skiappa. He just had a question, and he's gonna give the presentation, then you'll have plenty of opportunities to talk.
I thought he was asking for an explanation.
If you had a specific issue, I thought we would.
That's
take
what I
that up.
was suggesting, a specific issue.
Do you need the presentation?
So, in a previous meeting, Trustee Model had brought up the fact that my campaign received a contribution from McNaughton Development, and that I had approved a development by McNaughton Lakeside Point, which was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. And it was a plan that was taken over from Weekly, who abandoned the project. McNaughton took over that project, lowered the scope, lowered the density. It was a unanimous decision by the planning decision, and so I went along with the planning decision. It's an apparent conflict of interest to you, Zach Model. So what I'm doing is I'm removing it from the ordinance so that a vote may be taken, and I will abstain from that vote.
Well, thank you for making your conflict known. I appreciate that. I think that's the right thing. We should always let people know when we've taken donations from somebody with business before the board. So Evan, if you'll please continue, you're recognized to continue your presentation. no other questions from the trustees then? Okay.
I'll agree with trustee Chiappa. My name was also brought up at that meeting, and even though the plan commission recommended the deal 7-0, I will also abstain.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your honesty. Thank you. Okay, is there a motion and a second on this? So moved.
Second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion on it? Clerk, please call the roll.
Let me get my.
You're doing fine.
Trustee Snyder? Yes. Trustee Vital?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Abstain.
Trustee Pavesa?
Abstain.
Trustee Francis?
Yes?
Trustee Model?
Yes.
4-0.
Great, the motion carries. Okay, great. Next one that we had skipped over was under considerations. It was F, approval of subdivision entryway monuments at Lakeside Point subdivision. And I take it your reasoning is the same here, trustee Scappa, on this one?
Yes, I don't want.
Oh, do we need to? Sorry, thank you very much. All right, perfect. We'll come back to you. Under considerations, now we're on the Sterigenics update, which I was looking forward to hearing this. So under considerations 8A, who is taking that one? Okay,
I'll
great.
start. Thank you. At the last meeting, the village board directed staff to send a letter to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency asking for more ambient air testing, and the board also directed us to put on tonight's agenda the consideration to award a contract for additional ambient air quality assessment services within the village of Burr Ridge. That item is is next on the agenda as item 8B on tonight's agenda. Also, the Environmental Quality Commission met last week on Wednesday, March 6th. The actions taken by the EQC included their direction to staff to begin the process of scheduling a workshop with all the stakeholders for the purpose of joining forces to influence legislation and the legislative process. There are currently three bills pending at the state level and one at the federal level. The stakeholders will include the neighboring villages, our state and federal legislators, Illinois Environmental Commission, and others. Staff will be scheduling that workshop in the coming weeks, and there'll be a public notice of that meeting as there are for all of the Environmental Quality Commission meetings. The commission also unanimously the commission unanimously approved a motion recommending that the village board proceed with the additional air testing that is being considered on this agenda, again, item 8B. And finally, the commission unanimously approved a motion recommending that the village board send a letter to the governor thanking him for issuing the seal order that supports our public health in our communities. So those were the specific actions taken by the Environmental Quality Commission. Also, in regards to the additional air testing, this kind of falls into 8B, but I'll just continue on this subject generally. I did have some follow-up discussions with the village of Willowbrook about doing additional air testing. They have informed me that their consultant has recommended to them that no additional testing be done at this time. There were a variety of reasons for that recommendation. One was that they have done, Willowbrook and the U.S. EPA independently, have done an additional 3 weeks of testing after the seal order was issued. So we will have 3 weeks of test results from two different sources, EPA and Willowbrook, available soon that show the ethylene oxide results after the closing of Sterigenics. That's one reason they're suggesting no more air testing be done at this time. Also, their consultants are concerned that additional air testing may delay the health risk assessment that the EPA is preparing that will be used to establish new rules and regulations for the regulatory authority over ethylene oxide. Their consultants also feel that the current data is sufficient for proceeding with the new EPA regulations. Willowbrook did indicate that they are holding the option of doing additional testing as they move forward, but at this time, they prefer not to have additional testing done, and they are requesting that the village not proceed with any additional testing at this time. You do, under 8B, have the proposal from our consultant to do additional air testing. You can address that issue when it comes up on the agenda.
So can you clarify, it was Willowbrook or the EPA that asked us not to do additional testing?
Willowbrook, Village of Willowbrook and the City of Darien was in agreement, I'm told. They did
Not heard from the EPA at all,
No.
at all?
They did, as I said, they did do additional testing beyond what they were originally scheduled to end on February 28th. They tested for another week or week and a half, and I'm told just concluded their testing last week, the end of last week. So we did get some additional testing above and beyond what they had originally planned to do.
Okay, and the outgassing cycle is concluded now then, because that was my understanding. It was still going on.
Evidence indicating yes.
So the testing has been taking place after the outgassing cycle was concluded. Okay. And then when are we going to address the three items from the committee? Those will be at another time?
You could address those now.
Okay, well, we'll ask the board to look at those three items in a minute, but I saw, I think, a question from trustee Paveza.
Yeah, in this, I heard about the letter, and I also talked with several other people involved. And like most of us, we really wanted more testing, but it appears now that they're afraid that if we do more testing, it's just gonna be a ploy for Sterigenics and their people to delay more, and going to court. So that's the main reason that Willowbrook and Darien suggest that, hey, if there's a need, they're glad we're with them, but they would prefer that we do not get involved with this testing because they think it'll just be another delay for Sterigenics in their court actions.
Trustee,
So did they reach out to you just on phone, or they send something in an email or writing that they've asked us not?
I called them, as I had been told that they didn't want additional air testing, so I called my colleague, Tim Halleck, the village administrator, to go over that and had a conversation with him on the phone.
Can you ask him to send you an email on that conversation? This way,
Sure.
we'll have the
I'm sure
documentation,
he'd
and
be
we're just not
happy to do that.
Thank you.
did you have a question, trustee Scott?
So as a member of the Environmental Quality Committee, I was one of the members that voted for additional testing, but now that there is this new information out, and ultimately what I want to cause is action. So I want Sterigenics closed and permanently closed. And so it's my understanding if we continue testing, that will elongate the close of results, and it will take longer to get to the EPA. What I want is all right, we close testing now, and we vet those results to EPA, so those are the new standards set, so that they're not allowed to open again. And that's my understanding of why we should not continue to do testing.
So another question from the board, or trustee Francis is the chairman of the.
I have a question.
Yes, you're recognized.
Thank you. So we've been promised this report from the EPA this spring, correct?
Correct.
So here it is, the middle of March almost, March 11th, and there's still no report. And if it's the concern of Willowbrook and Darien that if we do more testing, it'll delay this report, I don't want to contribute to that delay. This report on the cancer risks will further define the issues with Sterigenics. It'll further elevate the problems that they're causing. And the sooner we get this report out, the better. My opinion, it'll be consistent with what's been discussed in the past with the cancer risks, and it'll be further evidence to close the facility permanently. Thank you.
Any other question? Oh, trustee McCall.
Do the villages have a plan of what will happen after the EPA results come out, or what they're thinking of? Will they plan to do some testing after that based on the results, or?
We always have the option of doing more testing. In fact, I was going to say that we'll certainly keep watching, and as we've been doing, every board meeting, we'll give you an update.
Right.
And we have the proposal from our consultant, and so at any time, we can, I've talked to the consultant, they said, just let us know, and we can be out in a week or less even to do the testing. So we can jump on that immediately, almost immediately.
Yeah, I agree, we need to do whatever we can to keep this company closed and shut down permanently. So, makes sense, thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions from the board, or Evan, did you have anything else to add?
I have nothing on that. I just wanted to not nod in the audience and just make myself available on anything on that. So.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, I share all the concerns expressed here that the company needs to be closed, stay closed, and the EPA needs to do something to take action. I wouldn't want to delay that. You know, we could always, I suppose, if something happened or they start going awry, we could call an emergency meeting, right? With
Yeah.
24 hours notice, we could call a
48, yeah.
48 hours notice, so we can all keep that in mind. If something starts to go awry, we could meet quickly and take action to get testing or whatever needs to be done. Okay, what about the other proposals from the Environmental Quality Commission? A lot of them sound like sensible things to me. The letter to the governor, anybody want to make a motion or anything? Is that appropriate right now, Doug?
I think so, yeah. Motion to direct staff to prepare a draft letter that would be signed by all of the trustees to the governor, thanking him for issuing the seal order.
And the workshop is happening anyway?
Workshop's happening anyway. I don't think you need to take action on that.
Okay.
And, if you have comments on it or suggestions, I'm sure the EQC would be glad to hear that. And then motion also, well, I suppose when 8B comes up, you would want a motion to table that or not approve it.
We can table it, right?
Right, just table it, I suppose. So right now, I suppose the only motion would be to direct staff to prepare that letter to the governor.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on it? This is a motion to prepare a letter from the Board of Trustees to the governor, thanking him for issuing the seal order on Sterigenics. No discussion? Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Just one follow-up on that too. I'm thinking that maybe we want to send another letter, or direct me, as I did before, to send another letter to the US EPA, basically withdrawing our request for them to do additional air testing, because that's still out there, at least for now. I don't know if that requires a motion or just a consensus, but.
And the purpose of that would be not to further delay their.
Right.
Okay, makes sense.
All in favor, say aye to withdrawing that letter.
Aye.
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 Great, that carries. Oh, any objections? No, okay, that does carry very clearly. All right, next we're on consideration 8B, which was the ambient air testing in question. Consideration of recommendation to award contract for ambient air quality assessment services. Does somebody want to make a motion to table that?
I make a motion that any further action on this item be tabled.
And you need to specify a date for the next meeting, maybe, or?
Can we table it indefinitely?
Can.
Yeah.
And then bring it back up. Bring it back up.
Yeah, table it indefinitely till we need to bring it back up.
Wonderful, thank you for the clarification. Okay.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion on that? Wonderful, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Great, now we're under 8C, under considerations. Consideration of draft ordinance establishing valet licensing in Burr Ridge.
I will turn this one over to Assistant to the Village Administrator, Evan Walter.
Thank you, Village Administrator. Thank you, Board. At this time, we're going to be discussing 8C. This is draft ordinance to establish a valet licensing program within the Village of Burr Ridge. This was originally scheduled at February 11th, 2019 at your direction. At this time, there really is no mechanism for requiring valet operators to be directly licensed to the village, nor is there any real regulatory authority over licensing of valet operators, except in routine traffic enforcement. This was an idea that was brought up suggesting that we have more stringent regulations placed on valet operators. Doug, if you wouldn't mind, I've got a file open called Sample Valet Map at the top there. Thank you. So this is Village Hall. This is not a restaurant or anything downtown. But what this basically shows is what a sample permit would look like were it to be enacted by the board. So what we're looking at here is there are two separate items here that are under consideration, plus a third optional one, which is the valet route. So if we've all been to the Village Hall, obviously if we're here, we've been here. We have a pretty good idea of the parking lot. So the red box would be the proposed valet staging area for the Village Hall if one were needed for this location. The blue box in the top left, that's our main parking lot. That would be designated as valet parking. So these are the two basic elements of a valet license that would be in place for any valet operator that would be coming into the village, either permanent or temporary. So let's just say the Village Hall needed to get a valet license from ourselves, just as an example. We would consider and or approve a space for valet staging, which is about where the front door is. The valet parking would be approved for the back, so anything in that back lot would be accessible for a valet to park cars at, to store them while a person is attending a meeting to village business. And then they could be returned to the valet staging area at the end of the day. A few communities have what's called a valet route, and I wanted to include that just to give you an idea of what that would look like visually on a map. Valet route is basically where the valet can operate a vehicle in between the staging and the parking area. The purpose of the route is to basically deter valets from making routes through residential areas, through unapproved routes, places maybe through a busy light that we don't want to have valets traveling through. But that's an optional item that's not included in the ordinance in front of you, just for transparency and clarification. The only two are valet staging and parking. All valet parking licenses would be subject to the board review and approval, so any permit that comes through for this would be subject to your discretion and approval. It would require submission of a valet parking plan. It would indicate the location of staging areas and or parking areas, so again, the red and blue areas. We would do a staff review before this were to come up. We want to review it with the police chief, public works, with myself, anybody who's involved with perhaps land use, just making sure that it's had a cursory eye on it before it comes to the board for final approval. Could be issued for an unlimited period of time, subject to it being changed. So some communities do this where it's just one license and it's good until it needs to be changed or it's revoked for some reason. Other communities suggest an annual license. That's just to really keep up on things as we go. Fees are charged for the license in our analysis of other towns. We found anything from $25 to $250. Those are again on an annual or permanent basis. The draft regulations also suggest that each violation of the license will be subject to a ticket, which is comparable to a P ticket that you would maybe receive right now for illegally parking or something. The draft regulations further suggest that upon issuance of a third ticket within any given 12-month period, the license will be placed on a board agenda for either suspension or outright revocation. Suspensions would be for a length of time less than a year, or it may be as determined by the Board of Trustees. At the end of the suspension, the license would be automatically reinstated, and then revocation would prohibit the licensee from working in the village for a year. So basically, if you're issued 3 violations for breach of your permit, the board has the right to suspend or revoke it outright, subject to your discretion. Just knowing how important this was, we reached out to the properties as best we could who would be most affected by this, mostly restaurants in town here. I know we have spoken to Capri. I also has received an email from the Village Center, our new owners, trying to reach a good relationship with them. They simply state, Evan, thank you for sending along the memo for the valet license. Reading the memo, I would agree that with regulating the operators, but would urge to keep the annual license fee to a minimum so that we may try and have free valet service for all Village Center visitors. So they don't appear to be objecting to the concept of the license. They simply want to make sure that the village board is keeping the fee to a minimum to allow for complimentary service to be offered. Again, that's from the owners of the Village Center. Again, draft license regulations are before you. They're about 4 pages long. I'd be happy to go into more detail as to what best practices look like, or if there's any other questions regarding our actual draft licensing itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Evan. Are there questions from the board at this time? Yes, Trustee Snyder.
I want to thank you, very well done. Very well done, well done.
Very well explained, too.
Yes.
It's easy to understand, yeah.
I'm personally pleased to see this. You know, we've had some property issues, we've had some, accidents and stuff, we had some parking issues, so it sounds like this can hopefully make sure everybody's following the rules, using the village roads properly, so I'm pleased. I think it sounds reasonable. I don't have any more questions at this time. Okay, if then a motion.
Question, question, please.
I'm sorry, trustee Francis, please.
Question, please. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So the valet license, the valet person puts forth a plan of action, how he's going to manage the cars, the customers and such. And how will the village know if there's a violation of this plan? Does the resident have to call that in, or is it the police are going to inform the village staff? How's the mechanism work for this?
Certainly. I think there are two options here. The first is obviously we have the opportunity to have complaints registered. The majority of our code enforcement, code compliance program is complaint-based. Staff does not go out looking for violations throughout the village on a daily basis. We only are called out if a complaint is registered. Also, a violation would then empower the police to be more proactive in their regulations. It would be saying, if there's a speed limit on the road, this license would act in a similar fashion to where if a police officer did notice a violation of a permit, somehow they could issue a P ticket, issue a warning, whatever the appropriate mechanism is for that to take place. So there are two options that we can readily go about through enforcement of this procedure.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And this is additional work for staff. I understand that. We're always asking our staff to do more work with less tools and less resources, so I have a concern about that. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Great, okay. Was there I'm sorry, we've got one more comment, question?
We have a code enforcement officer. Does that person work on the weekend, or could that person swing by every so often and check on if the code is being enforced?
So typically, when a valet license would be most used, it would be after normal staff hours, so it'd be in the evenings or the weekends. However, all the police officers are deputized as code enforcement officials, for lack of a better word. So we have a single person, Andres Beltran, our analyst, who does this as part of his normal job. We no longer have a singular person who comes in on a part-time basis. We instead happen to give him that responsibility. He's here 5 days a week now. He can be more responsive, but a lot of these things we do delegate to the police department, and they end up providing a lot of the enforcement mechanisms for us during evenings and weekends.
Yes, trustee Scapa.
Do we know how many restaurants use valet, or how many valet companies there are in the village?
I'm not sure about valet companies. We know that 5 restaurants use them somewhat regularly, more than once a year.
Okay, was there a motion?
Make a motion.
Okay,
Just for clarification, the motion would be to direct staff to prepare the final ordinance for your consideration.
Make a motion to direct staff to finish the final.
If I may, we do not have a cost of license. It's blank in the draft ordinance, so there is no set cost right now, so we need to establish that. Again, there are 2 types of licenses. First is permanent or annual. We need to have a clarification on that. There also is provisions for a temporary license. So if someone's having a 2-day event or a week-long event, that would be also needing to get a permit. And I think we had recommended 2 different levels of pricing.
yeah, I'm looking at it. So your motion needs to include a full.
I'd like to direct staff to let them make the decision with regard to the minimums, like $100 per annual, so they're, following through on everything. Temporaries or the part-time ones, that's under staff's direction. They can make it 25 or 50 for that 2-day to 5-day situation.
Clear?
Okay, so the, you're good with the clerk's good, we got it, and is there a second then?
Second.
Okay, great. Any further discussion on the motion? Wonderful. Okay, let's call the roll then, please.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee McFall?
Yes.
Trustee Bavazza?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Skiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Okay, great. That carries. So now we're down to consideration 8D. This is the consideration of recommendation to award contract for 2019 road program resurfacing project to Orange Crush LLC of Hillside, Illinois, in the amount of $627,035. We've got Mr. Pressing on the stage here to go over this.
Thank you. Just a few quick slides to revisit what we last talked about on January 14th as part of our 2018-2019 capital programs. Back then, we talked about the 2018 wrap-up and closeout and final costs of that year, and proposed the 2019 capital improvements program. The focus of our presentation when it comes up, or I just keep talking, is a road program resurfacing contract. In summary, it hasn't changed since you saw it in January 14th. The street listing is the same. The resurfacing program would still do the same mileage of streets. And which, back in a slide, we can just kind of go in order from.
There you go.
There we go.
You did such a nice job, we should see it for sure.
So the street listing is still the same. That's the focus of our presentation tonight, is the resurfacing contract. The crack sealing and pavement marking will have bid openings as part of a joint bid process with other DuPage County municipalities, probably in late March or early April is typical. What's not on the slides there is a Burr Ridge Parkway resurfacing. It's not shown on the map, but is certainly an important component that'll keep us busy this summer. That's on the state letting. We anticipate that bid opening is on Arbor Day, on April 26th. That's down in Springfield. It's off there, it's on schedule, and we'll watch that bid opening down there. What's important to note about that project is as we discussed in January, we took the motor fuel tax funding off of the road program contracts and processing and put that onto this STP funded project. So that was the motor fuel tax funds in the amount of about $280,000 will fund the remainder of construction and the engineering for Burr Ridge Parkway. And on the next slide, we'll see kind of how that made the difference. By doing so, as a non-MFT funded project, the road program resurfacing contract was all done locally. So we did local bid preparation, local bidding, local advertising, which allowed us to avoid the IDOT reviews and processing that would have added more time. We could also add contractors into the mix that were not normally state qualified for state funded projects, which then resulted in an early bidding, increased competition. So we had our earliest bid opening ever on February 21st. The results you can see here. So our engineer's estimate in the budget that we initially proposed was about $666,000. The lowest responsive and responsible bid was a little more than $35,000 or $39,000 better than that. So about 6% different, 6% to the better than our engineer's estimate. How that flushes out then in the total 2019 capital program is on the last slide. So this uses the actual cost from the road program resurfacing contract bids, and the rest of the prices would roughly stay the same at this point. The actual costs then are included in the proposed 2019-20 budget documents that we're reviewing later tonight. But again, that flushes out to the savings of about, so far, $39,000, a little more than $39,000 to the proposed program from what originally was budgeted. So at that point, I'll answer any questions or make a motion to.
Well, thank you for your good guidance, helping us come in under budget here already. This is a great start to the year. Any questions or comments from the board? Yes, Trustee Schiappa.
I think this proactive program of managing our roads is what has contributed to our roads as of today. And they're wonderful roads. I love driving in Burr Ridge versus some of our other neighboring towns. And so I applaud this proactive approach to maintaining our roads here in the village of Burr Ridge. So thank you, David.
Great. Further comments? Oh, yes.
Well, I just wanted to personally thank Dave Preissig and his project engineer, Jim Medema, for their innovative thinking and bringing this forward to us and saving us some money, saving the village significant dollars. They're right, it was Dave's recommendation that we use the MFT funding for the Burr Ridge program, Burr Ridge Parkway resurfacing, so that it freed up this contract for more bidding and earlier bidding, which directly led to almost $40,000 savings to the village, and that's all due to Dave and Jim's work as our village engineer. So thank you very much, Dave.
So Dave, what's on next 2 weeks from now is John, what are you gonna say? What's the next project?
The bar is high.
Stay tuned.
Thank you. We're all.
Could I make a comment, please?
I'm sorry?
Could I make a comment,
Trustee
please?
Francis, yes, you're recognized, yes.
Thank you. I agree with Trustee Schiappa about the quality and condition of our roads. They're a very important asset to our village, to our businesses, to our residents. And also I agree with Village Administrator Pollock. Village Engineer Preissig and Project Engineer Medina did an excellent job. We get these bid packages out. They're clean, they're concise, and they get out early, so we get the best pricing. And I want to thank them for that. It saves the residents money every year because we get them out early. Thank you.
We are very fortunate to have such a good staff, and especially in Public Works, led by Dave, your whole team, and yourself, thank you. Okay, so is there a motion then to?
Yes.
Okay, so second.
I'd like to recommend to award the contract to, for 2019 to Orange Crush LLC. That's,
Okay, there's a first and a second. Any further discussion about the motion?
We might want to add the amount as well.
in the amount of $627,035.
And your second still stands? Okay. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee McCall?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Scalpa?
Yes.
Trustee Francis?
Yes?
Trustee Pavesa?
Yes.
Trustee McCall, Model?
Yes.
6-0.
Wonderful. The motion also carries, and so we're off to a good start with our road program here for the year. Okay, now we come to the point of the meeting, other considerations, K. 8F, thank you very much for keeping me on track here. Back to the approval of subdivision entryway monuments at Lakeside Point. I should have two different highlighters, I wouldn't get confused. Approval of subdivision entryway monuments at Lakeside Point subdivision, which I believe, again, was saying.
Right, yeah, I pulled it off because of the perceived conflict of interest that you pointed out. So that's why I didn't want to vote on the consent agenda.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Is any other comments at this moment?
A question?
Yes.
Question,
Trustee
please.
Francis.
How long ago was this campaign contribution, by the way?
It was 4 years ago.
Okay, thank you.
You're making a motion then?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve subdivision entryway monuments at Lakeside Point subdivision.
Second.
Any further discussions on the motion? Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Trustee McCall?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Scalpa?
Abstain.
Trustee Francis?
Yes?
Trustee Pavesa?
Abstain.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
4-0.
Great, the motion carries. Now we're back down to 8K, other considerations for announcement, deliberation, and/or discussion only. No official action will be taken. Is there any? Yes, Trustee Pavesa.
Just a reminder, I know a lot of people take advantage of it, but the Secretary of State, their office will be here on Wednesday. So if any of the residents or people in the area have any business with the Secretary of State, they can handle it here in our boardroom on Wednesday.
That's from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Any other, yes, Trustee Scalpa.
So, thank you. I just wanted to finish my discussion on the Open Meetings Act.
Perfect.
So, under the Open Meetings Act, statute 2.06, that states that any person shall be permitted an opportunity to address public officials under the rules established and recorded by the public body. Okay. Number 2, the Village of Burridge has enacted 18 rules which govern how we conduct our board meetings. You can refer to that municipal code online, and that's section 2.67, which are the rules of order. Okay. Again, nowhere on these rules is there a sign-up sheet mentioned. Nowhere in these rules is it a requirement that you must sign in order to speak during public comments, resident or non-resident. Nowhere listed in these rules is it mentioned during public comment that you can only speak on an agenda item. And rule number 1, the agenda must be adhered to. No objections may be made. The agenda must be adhered to. But rule number 1 may be suspended when no objections are made or upon vote of majority board. Okay, so you skipped over the residents' comments at the last meeting, the second residents' comments. And that was not approved by I just want to emphasize that we do have rules of order. There's 18 of them, and they're in our Village of Burridge Municipal Code, section 2.67.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, are there any other, yes, trustee Snyder?
Doug, how long have we had people sign in?
Well, we have not required it at every meeting.
But
We have periodically, I remember Mayor Straub on several occasions asked that people sign in, usually if we had a large crowd for some reason. But as a routine matter, it was not.
Since the time I've been on the board, it seems that everyone's just pretty much familiar with like the clock, everyone signs in every meeting. So I'm just kind of curious. Thank you.
And I mean, the purpose of the sign-in is not really to keep people from speaking, but more to just kind of organize the meeting so that we don't have pure chaos.
Thank you.
Well, may I speak, please?
Yes, trustee Francis.
So, sure, we can have a sign-in sheet if you guys want, but it has to be a rule that's approved by this board. And there's no rule in our 18 rules of a sign-in sheet. So, technically, we're operating outside those rules by having a sign-in sheet. Okay? Now, let's say, and another rule that was imposed was that residents could only speak about agenda items. So let's say a resident wants to thank Assistant Village Administrator Evan Walter for his great job on Sterigenics. Well, that's not an agenda item, so that person can't thank that Evan for that job. Or Public Works does a great job for plowing snow in front of someone's house. Well, it's not an agenda item, so that resident can't get up and speak about that. So that rule that was made up, that doesn't apply. It's not part of our 18 rules that we have in place.
Thank you for your comment. So, Attorney Euler and I just spoke, and what is important, we're a village board here. We're here to conduct village business. So we did ask that the non-residents keep their comments related to village business, and we followed past practice, and we had a sign-in sheet. Now, there were multiple calls for that sign-in sheet, multiple opportunities to be on it, and we're having a sign-in sheet tonight. The chair does have some discretion and gets to maintain order in the meeting, and it's important that we do maintain order, especially when we have a lot of emotional topics and people here who want to speak, that they should all have a chance to be heard, but it should be done in an orderly process, and I think we can all agree to that, and I think that was the intent of what was being done there and continues on tonight. So, I don't have any further comments then. Now we're
One more
back to
comment, please.
Comments again.
One more comment, please.
Trustee Francis.
Yes, thank you. One more comment, please. Well, the whole sign-up sheet business backfired last meeting, and it led to upset residents. It led to the first time ever I've had to see the police chief stand up and ask a resident to sit down, all because of the silly sign-in sheet. I've never seen that happen in my 22 years of service to this village.
Thank you for your
So
comments.
it's not, the sign-up sheet is not maintaining order, it's creating disorder. Thank you.
Thank you for your opinion. Again, every time, if we sign in, if we maintain order, everyone will get to speak. If people rush the stage and they're screaming, we're not gonna have that. That's not the kind of meeting we're having here. So, anyway, we do have a sign-in sheet right there before this last resident's comments. Is there any resident that is not signed in that would like to speak? This is your opportunity. Please, Ms. Mayor, please sign in. We need to have your name and information for the record. Please sign in as a resident. Thank you.
I don't understand why. We just said it's not needed.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, is there anybody else that would like, hold on, you haven't been recognized by the chair yet, please. Is there anybody else that would like to sign in, please? Any other resident? This is your opportunity. If you can please pass me the sign-in sheet.
You're signed up, Mr. Walters. Waters, sorry.
Okay, Yvonne, Mayor Burridge resident, you're recognized for 5 minutes, please.
I'm just going to follow up on what I said at the beginning of my comments. There are rules that need to be followed. To your point, Mr. Model, to maintain order, to get things done right. And yet, I pointed out the rule, the most important rule, which is about conflicts of interest, that this entire Board of Trustees violated last week. when they didn't stop you from casting your vote. And they didn't acknowledge that your vote shouldn't count under Municipal Code 2.67, Rule of Order number 10. Mr. Model, I'm shocked that you sit there in silence and that the rest of the trustees, after I made my opening comment, that nobody had the courage to say, let's talk about what happened. If you guys violate your own rules, how can there be any trust by community members that you aren't going to continue to violate rules? Mr. Model, you've already broken the trust of everyone in D86. Why are you laughing? What's so funny? You go to meetings. You went to a meeting last week in Oak Brook. You were invited as a representative of the Vote No group. They wanted to understand why they should vote yes or why they should vote no on the referendum. And you lied to these old people who live in that community, who are trying to make an informed decision and cast an informed vote based on facts, not fiction, not lies. And yet you went to that meeting and you claimed your Do Better plan would involve trimming the fat, trimming paid-for lunches that the teachers are using taxpayer money for. You think it's very funny, but it really isn't. Because then a community member stood up and corrected you during that meeting and said, in fact, the PTO, hardworking volunteers who raise money doing various fundraisers, that's the money that's used to pay for teachers. Our hardworking teachers who deserve a free lunch every once in a while, not on taxpayer dollars, but paid for by the PTO. And yet, despite the fact that that information was provided to you, you continue to insist that money is being wasted and squandered by the district in those methods. So if you expect the community to trust you, if you expect the community to trust this Board of Trustees, you need to tell the truth, you need to follow the rules. And when you don't follow the rules, and a resident steps up here and points it out to you, and you have your lawyer sitting there who's paid, I don't know how many $100 per hour to attend these meetings and whisper in your ear, I would expect that you guys would at least have the common courtesy to discuss it with the public. I'm only at 2 minutes, 45 seconds.
I'm watching.
I know you're watching the clock, but I've got my stopwatch going. You laugh, you think this is all very, very funny. It's not. You've driven a wedge in this community. You've divided the residents of Burr Ridge. You step up and you claim you represent everybody, but you don't. You don't. It's time for this Board of Trustees to recognize that there are rules that need to be followed, and I ask you all to show the courage to do so. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. We've got one more resident on the list who asked to speak last. John Bittner, would you like to? You're going to take a pass. Okay, great. I see no more on the list here. So that concludes residents' comments. Next, we've got to under 10, reports and communications from village officials. Yes, Mr. Faveza.
For the past 4 to 6 weeks, the village staff has been working on getting together the numbers for our budget for next year. And since this is an election year, I'm sure you're going to be bombarded with different flyers for and against everything that's right and wrong in the village. So all I'm asking is that this meeting and the next meeting follow what goes on and what is presented at our village budget. You will find out that the village is in very good shape. That's all I gotta say.
Wonderful.
Just asking people to pay attention to all the effort that's gone into our budget.
Wonderful, wonderful. I agree, and the staff spend a lot of time on it too. We'll get it done. All right, are there other reports or communications? Seeing none, okay, now we're on to non-residents' comments. Yes, there was one non-resident. Is there any other non-residents that have not signed up yet that would like to be signed up on the list? Okay, then Mr. Waters, you're recognized for 5 minutes, please. It starts now.
Hi, I'm Jeff Waters. I'm very excited to be with you guys tonight, especially you folks from Burr Ridge. I am considering moving to Burr Ridge, but one consideration I had was I don't understand, Zach, why you have taken it upon yourself to be so concerned with the local school referendum when the Burr Ridge Center just recently sold for 20 cents on the dollar. Frankly, you two trustees as well, I don't understand why you wouldn't support his dismissal because of that, focusing so much time on a school referendum and so little on the travesty that's become the Burr Ridge Center. Can you comment on that? Hold your thoughts. With respect to the referendum, you've been very critical, Zach, but recently you made public comments on video. You don't have a plan. So Mr. Corcoran's proposed a plan that took him probably 30 minutes to put together. You haven't put together one at all. We're all waiting, Zach, for that plan. And then lastly, Zach, I'm curious. I first lectured the Young Conservative group up at the high school on the north side of the district, the Conservative Club. And a couple weeks after that, you and Mr. Corcoran, in the spirit of objectivity, did the same. But you brought a lady in there, Zach, by the name of Maureen Kevin. And Maureen Kevin told the students that she's going to have to sell her condominium if taxes go higher to the extent that this referendum were to pass. But Zach, what you must have known when you chose to bring her in there, she doesn't live in the district. And you and Mr. Corcoran chose to bring her in there. So I think I probably have a couple minutes left. Let me know when that time's up. Because I just want to make sure people understand the type of mayor they could be electing if they choose not to elect that gentleman named Grasso and choose to elect you. Here's a Facebook post that I put on your page to try to be a gentleman, like I am tonight, trying to communicate, open the lines of communication. And I was squashed. My post was deleted, and we were no longer friends. And here's what I said. I'll make it quick, because I know I'm short on time. The Burr Ridge Center was recently sold for 20 cents on the dollar, built for approximately $70 million, sold for 14. If you consider paying any attention to the aspect of your community, as opposed to tanking the public school referendum, you're quite critical. What's your proposal? But you don't have a plan. Would you be willing to debate anyone on this? And you squash that. You delete my post. You've done this now to 19 or 20 people in the course of 2 hours of taking them off Facebook. And now today, through the high school, you found a way to squash the debate with me and my committee. When are you gonna, quote unquote, step up to the plate and speak up for yourself and stop hiding behind your laptop? With whatever time I have left, other than the Maureen Kevin stuff, please, Zach, now address me.
Are your comments concluded?
Can you answer my question? Do we perhaps go out for a drink and talk like gentlemen? Or does it always have to be back and forth, blocking communication amongst two gentlemen like us? I'll buy.
I think you're done with your comments then.
Is my 5 minutes up? Because if they're not up, and no one's told me they are, would you be willing to join me for a cocktail this evening, Zach? Thank you.
Keep some order in the room. Thank you. All right, now we're ready for adjournment. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any, please call the roll.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
Trustee Matal?
Yes.
Trustee Pavesa?
Yeah.
Trustee Francis?
Yes?
Trustee Schiappa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes. Okay, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your